It was a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town, the kind of place where people liked their peace. The houses were spaced apart, each sitting behind tall trees and long driveways. On one side of that area was a narrow road that didn't connect to any main street. It led to only 3 houses, and the road itself belonged to one man, Alex. It was his private property, something he had taken care of for years. His father had built that road decades ago, and after his father passed, Alex kept it the same way, clean, well-marked, and peaceful. He lived alone most of the time. His kids were grown up and had moved to the city. His work as a police officer kept him busy, and even though he was now the head of the department, he still liked the simple life that the small road gave him. People in nearby houses respected him. They knew he was calm, polite, and always willing to help if something went wrong. For a long time, things were perfectly quiet. But that changed when a new family moved into the empty house down the lane. The moving trucks came early one morning. Alex saw them from his window. He didn't think much of it. People came and went all the time, and he hoped they'd be kind and easy to get along with. That afternoon, he walked over with a small welcome basket, just some coffee and muffins from the local bakery. A woman came out to meet him. She was in her 50s, wearing sunglasses and holding a clipboard. She looked surprised to see him standing there. "Hi there," Alex said in his usual friendly voice. "I'm your neighbor, live just down the road. Thought I'd welcome you to the area." She didn't smile much. She took the basket, gave it a quick glance, and said, "Oh, thanks. I was just going over some things about this neighborhood." "Are you part of the HOA?" Alex frowned a little. "HOA?" he asked. "No, there isn't one here. This whole road is private property. It's just the 3 houses along here." She seemed confused. "That can't be right," she said, flipping through her clipboard. "Every community has an association. It keeps things organized. I'll have to check that." He laughed a little, trying to keep things light. "No need to check, ma'am. My dad built this lane himself. The city confirmed years ago that it's privately owned. You don't need to worry about HOA rules here." She nodded slowly, but didn't seem convinced. "Well, I like to keep neighborhoods tidy," she said. "I'm used to things being run properly." Alex smiled again, trying to end the awkward chat. "Nothing wrong with that," he said kindly. "Anyway, welcome to the neighborhood." He gave a small wave and went back home. At first, he didn't think much about it. Maybe she was just one of those people who liked order. Everyone had their quirks. But within a week, strange things began happening. One morning, Alex came outside to find a bright yellow paper taped to his mailbox. In big bold letters, it said, "HOA violation notice, overgrown plants." Under it, there was a fine written in pen, $100, due immediately. Alex stared at the paper, almost laughing. He looked around, half expecting someone to jump out and say it was a prank. But no one did. The road was empty. The trees were still. Later that day, he saw the same woman walking up the road, clipboard in hand again. She was writing something down while staring at every yard. When she reached his house, she smiled in that stiff, official way. "I noticed your hedges are past the property line," she said. "I'll have to ask you to trim those by the end of the week. HOA rules." Alex put his hands in his pockets and smiled politely. "There are no HOA rules here," he said calmly. "I own this road. You're standing on private property right now." Her eyebrows went up. "Oh, I see. So you're one of those types," she said. "Well, whether you admit it or not, we all have to live by some standards." Alex wanted to laugh, but he didn't. He just nodded, said, "Have a nice day," and walked back inside. He could already tell this woman was going to be trouble. Over the next week, she started leaving printed notes on people's cars. She told the mail carrier to park in the correct area. She even walked up to delivery drivers, demanding they register with her before dropping off packages. Some neighbors complained quietly, but most just avoided her. One evening, Alex was washing his car when she came out again, this time looking upset. She pointed at his driveway and said, "You can't park that vehicle here overnight." Alex looked at her, confused. "What vehicle?" She gestured to his police SUV, parked neatly in front of his garage. "That one," she said firmly. "It's a government vehicle. You can't keep it in a residential area overnight. It's against the HOA policy." He chuckled lightly, trying to keep things calm. "Ma'am," he said, "this isn't HOA land and this vehicle belongs to me. I'm a police officer." She folded her arms. That's fine, she said, but the law still applies. This is a community area. You'll have to move it to a public lot. Alex took a slow breath. Actually, this is a private road. I'm the one who owns it. You're on my property right now. She didn't say anything for a moment, then pulled out her phone and snapped a picture of his car. If you don't comply, she said, I'll have to report you. He nodded, calm as ever. You do what you need to do, he said. That night, Alex sat on his porch with a cup of coffee, shaking his head. He wasn't angry, just amused. In his career, he had dealt with people far more difficult than her. But he also knew people like her could make life miserable for others if not handled properly. Still, he decided to let it slide. For now. A few days later, another note appeared on his front door. It said, "Final warning, HOA will take action if you continue to ignore regulations." He actually laughed out loud reading it. The HOA consisted of exactly one person, his new neighbor with a clipboard. One afternoon, a delivery van stopped at Alex's house to drop off a package. The driver was about to step out when the woman appeared again, waving her hands. "You can't stop here," she said sharply. "This is a private HOA road. Deliveries need authorization." Alex heard the noise and came outside. "He's fine," he said, walking over. "He's delivering something for me." She turned to him with that same tight smile. "You really think you can just ignore the rules, don't you?" Alex crossed his arms, his patience starting to thin. "Ma'am, these are my rules. I maintain this road. I built the sign you're standing next to. There's no HOA here, and there never has been." She frowned, then mumbled something under her breath about people who think they're above the law, and walked away. The delivery driver looked confused. "What's her deal?" he asked. Alex sighed. "She thinks she runs the neighborhood," he said with a small smile. "Don't worry about it." By now, most of the neighbors had heard about her behavior. They called her HOA Karen behind her back, a nickname that spread quickly. Every time she walked around with her clipboard, people ducked inside their houses to avoid conversation. Alex, meanwhile, tried to stay calm and professional. He told himself not to use his position or authority to embarrass her. But deep down, he knew this situation was going to reach a breaking point sooner or later. One evening, just as the sun was setting, he saw her standing at the edge of his property again, this time pointing some kind of measuring stick at the edge of his yard. He walked over, keeping his voice even. "Everything okay?" he asked. She looked up and said, "I'm checking property boundaries. I think part of your fence is too close to the road." "That might be an HOA violation." Alex blinked, trying not to laugh. "You do realize this road doesn't belong to the HOA, right?" She ignored him and kept writing something down. He took a deep breath, realizing that reasoning with her wasn't going to work. "All right," he said finally. "You have a good evening." She didn't answer. That night, Alex sat on his porch again, thinking about how strange the world had become. He'd spent years dealing with emergencies, real crimes, and tough situations. Yet somehow, the biggest problem in his quiet life now was a woman who refused to believe the road wasn't hers. He looked out at the long stretch of pavement that disappeared into the trees. It was the same road he'd learned to ride his bike on as a kid, the same one his dad had paved by hand. And now, after all these years, someone new thought she could control it with a clipboard and fake fines. Alex smiled to himself. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The woman's obsession with her imaginary HOA was about to go much further than anyone expected. And when it finally did, she would end up making one call she'd never forget, the one that would show her exactly who she was dealing with. A few days passed after the strange fence measuring incident, and Alex hoped things would calm down. He had work to focus on and didn't want to waste energy on neighborhood drama. For a while, it seemed like things were going back to normal. The mornings were quiet again. The trees rustled in the wind, and he could hear birds outside his kitchen window when he had his coffee. But the peace didn't last long. One morning, when he walked out to check the mail, he found another letter taped to his gate. This one looked even more official than the last. It had a printed HOA logo at the top, even though he knew there wasn't an HOA anywhere near that street. It said, "Notice of fine. Unauthorized vehicle parking and yard neglect." There was even a fake case number typed in small letters at the bottom. Alex couldn't help but laugh a little. "She's really going all in now," he muttered to himself. He folded the paper and tucked it into his pocket. He didn't plan to respond. But what really caught his attention wasn't the notice itself. It was that the letter mentioned 2 other houses on the same road. It claimed they were also being fined for things like leaving trash bins in sight and failure to maintain decorative standards. That's when Alex realized it wasn't just about him anymore. She had started bothering everyone. Later that evening, one of his neighbors, an older man who had lived there for over 20 years, knocked on Alex's door. He looked frustrated. "You getting these weird HOA letters too?" he asked. Alex nodded. "Yeah, I've got a few of them now. She's been pretty busy." The man sighed. "She came to my place this morning," he said. "Told me I had to repaint my mailbox. Said it was against community color standards." He shook his head. "There are no standards here. I told her to mind her own business, but she didn't take it well." Alex could tell the man was tired of it, and honestly, he was too. "Don't worry," Alex said. "I'll handle it if she keeps bothering you." He meant it. But he also wanted to avoid turning this into a bigger problem than it already was. A few days later, things got worse. A landscaping crew came to trim some of Alex's trees and clear the edge of the property. They'd worked with him for years and knew exactly where the property lines were. While they were unloading their tools, Alex noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. Sure enough, there she was again, clipboard in hand, walking straight toward them. She didn't even greet anyone before raising her voice. "Excuse me, you can't work here without HOA authorization," she shouted. The workers froze, confused. One of them looked over at Alex, unsure what to do. "It's all right," Alex said, walking toward her calmly. "They're working for me. You don't have any authority here." She stared at him like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Actually, I do," she said sharply. "This entire road falls under community jurisdiction, and we have strict landscaping rules. I can't have people breaking them." Alex crossed his arms and kept his tone even. "There's no community jurisdiction here. I've told you that before. This road is private property. I own it." Her face tightened. "You can't own a road," she said with confidence. "That's ridiculous." Alex didn't argue. He just said, "Ma'am, please stop harassing my workers," and turned back toward the crew. "You can keep going. Don't worry about her." That only made her angrier. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of them working. "These will be evidence," she said. "You'll be hearing from the HOA board." The landscapers exchanged nervous glances. One of them leaned over and whispered, "Boss, are we going to get in trouble for this?" Alex smiled slightly. "No," he said. "She doesn't have the power to do anything." But even as he said it, he could tell this was escalating. The woman wasn't just being nosy anymore. She genuinely believed she was in charge. That night, he saw her outside again, walking around with a flashlight. She was pointing it at mailboxes, cars, and even trash bins. At one point, she stood at the edge of his driveway and scribbled something into her clipboard. Alex stood by his window, watching, shaking his head. He'd seen strange things in his career, but this was something else. He went outside and called out to her. "Everything all right?" She turned quickly, startled. "Just doing my inspection," she said. "Inspection for what?" he asked. "For the HOA," she replied confidently. "I've had multiple complaints about this area. I'm documenting issues for the record." Alex took a slow breath, trying not to sound frustrated. "There is no HOA," he said again. "No board, no record, no authority. You're wasting your time." She gave a little smirk. "We'll see about that," she said, then walked off into the dark. The next morning, he found yet another paper on his car. This one said, "Final notice. Violation escalation pending HOA legal action." Alex couldn't help but laugh. He set the paper on his kitchen counter and took a picture of it with his phone, thinking he might need it later. When he got to work that day, one of his officers noticed he seemed distracted. "Rough morning, Chief?" the young officer asked. Alex chuckled. "You could say that. I've got a new neighbor who thinks she's running an HOA that doesn't exist." The officer laughed. "Oh, one of those," he said. "You want us to have a word with her?" Alex shook his head. "No, not yet. Let's see how far she takes it." That night, as he pulled into his driveway, he saw her standing near the road again, this time talking to another neighbor. From the way she was waving her hands around, it looked like she was trying to recruit him for something. The next day, Alex found a printed flyer in his mailbox titled, "Community Standards Committee, meeting this Saturday." He almost couldn't believe it. She was actually trying to form a fake HOA from scratch. By the end of the week, the whole neighborhood was talking about it. Some found it funny, others were annoyed. A few were genuinely worried she might cause real trouble. Alex, though, stayed patient. He'd been through worse. Saturday came, and true to her word, she hosted her meeting. Only 3 people showed up, and 2 of them left early. She stood at the end of the road, giving a speech about rules and order, while Alex watched from his porch, drinking coffee. He almost admired her determination. It took a special kind of confidence to keep pushing an idea like that when everyone else ignored it. But the peace didn't last much longer. One evening, Alex came home after a long shift. As he got out of his SUV, she came running over, waving a piece of paper in her hand. "You can't park that here," she yelled again. "This is community property." He looked at her, tired but calm. "Ma'am," he said, "I've told you many times, this isn't community property. This is my land." She raised her voice even more. "You think because you wear that uniform, you can just break the rules?" Alex glanced at the badge on his chest, then back at her. "I'm off duty," he said quietly. "And I haven't broken any rules," but she wouldn't stop. She followed him right up to his porch, yelling about regulations and bylaws. He finally turned around and said in a steady voice, "I'm going to ask you to step off my property. This is your last warning." She froze for a moment, then said, "I'll call the police." Alex simply nodded. "Go ahead." He went inside and closed the door behind him. Through the window, he saw her pacing back and forth, still talking to herself. He didn't expect her to actually call anyone that night. But something in his gut told him that this situation wasn't over. She was building up to something that would go way beyond fake notices and clipboard checks. And sure enough, over the next few days, she started acting even stranger. She stood by the road, taking pictures of every car that passed. She shouted at delivery drivers and told visitors they needed permits. One time, she even told a teenager who was jogging that unauthorized pedestrians aren't allowed after dark. Neighbors were starting to get fed up. People began calling Alex to complain, assuming he could handle it because of his job. But Alex didn't want to use his badge for personal matters. He believed in patience, in letting people show who they really were before taking action. Still, one evening, as he sat in his living room reading, he heard voices outside. When he looked out the window, he saw her again, this time pointing at his house and speaking to someone on the phone, pacing fast. He couldn't hear the full conversation, but he caught the words, "unauthorized gathering" and "reporting to authorities." Alex sighed, shaking his head. He didn't know exactly what she was planning, but he could tell it was going to involve him, and it was going to involve the police. He leaned back in his chair, half smiling, half tired. "Well," he said to himself, "this should be interesting." He had no idea that the next call she made would change everything, and that she'd soon be standing face to face with the very person she was calling for help from. A few quiet days went by after the last argument. For a moment, Alex thought maybe she had finally calmed down. The note stopped showing up on his door, and the road was peaceful again. He went to work, came home, and tried to forget about her. But he didn't know that while things looked calm on the surface, she was still planning something. The following weekend, Alex decided to have a small cookout at his house. It was his first free weekend in weeks, and he wanted to relax. A few of his friends from work came over. Some were officers, but none wore uniforms. They were just friends hanging out, grilling food, and talking. The smell of barbecue drifted through the air. Music played softly in the background. Nothing loud, just enough to give the evening a warm feeling. Everyone was laughing, sharing stories from work, and enjoying the fresh air. Around sunset, as the light began to fade, Alex noticed a familiar figure standing at the end of his driveway. She had her arms crossed and that same clipboard in her hand. He sighed quietly. "Here we go again," he muttered under his breath. She started walking toward them, fast and stiff, her face already red with irritation. "Excuse me," she shouted before she was even close. "What is this? You can't have a party here without HOA permission." The group turned to look at her. One of Alex's friends whispered, "Is that the HOA lady you were talking about?" Alex nodded. "Yep, that's her." She kept walking until she stood right near the grill, still pointing her finger like she was addressing a meeting. "This is an unauthorized gathering," she said, "and I've seen those cars parked all over the road. This is a violation of HOA rules." Alex set down the spatula he was holding and wiped his hands on a towel. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "we've been over this. There's no HOA here. This is private property and these are my guests." She glanced at the group suspiciously. "Private property doesn't mean you can break community guidelines," she said. "Who are these people anyway?" "They're my friends," Alex said evenly. "We're just having dinner." She looked from one man to another, her eyes narrowing. "You all look very official," she said. "What are you, pretending to be police or something?" The group fell silent for a moment. One of the men tried not to laugh. Alex stayed calm, though he could feel his patience slipping. "No one's pretending, ma'am," he said. "We're all law enforcement. But right now we're just off duty having dinner." That seemed to make her even more suspicious. "Law enforcement, really? That's what you're calling it?" She snapped. "I don't believe that for a second. You people are impersonating officers, and you're parked illegally on HOA land." Alex shook his head slowly. "Ma'am, this isn't HOA land. I've told you that more times than I can count." She stepped back, pulling out her phone. "You can explain that to the real police," she said. "Because I'm calling them right now." His friends exchanged looks. One of them whispered, "You're kidding me." "She's actually calling 911?" Alex didn't even move. "Let her," he said quietly. "This might be the only way she learns." She stood in the driveway, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in an overly dramatic voice. "Yes, I'd like to report a disturbance," she said. "There are men impersonating police officers having a loud party and trespassing on HOA property." Alex leaned against the grill, sipping his drink, as his friends tried not to laugh out loud. After a few minutes, she hung up and crossed her arms. "They're on their way," she said proudly. "You'll all be arrested soon enough." Alex nodded calmly. "All right," he said softly. "We'll wait right here." The group went quiet, partly amused, partly curious to see how this would play out. 15 minutes later, faint flashing lights appeared at the far end of the lane. 2 patrol cars rolled up slowly, headlights sweeping over the driveways. Karen, as the neighbors called her, hurried out to meet them, waving her arms like someone flagging down traffic. "Over here," she shouted. "They're right here." "That's them." The officers stepped out, looking around with puzzled expressions. She immediately started talking fast. "These men are impersonating officers," she said. "They have police vehicles and fake badges, and they're trespassing on private HOA land." The 2 officers glanced at each other, then at the group standing calmly around the grill. One of them squinted, clearly recognizing Alex right away. Chief?" the officer said hesitantly. Alex smiled a little. "Evening, fellas," he said. "Thanks for coming out." The other officer's eyes widened. He turned toward the woman. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this man's the chief of police." Her mouth fell open, but she quickly tried to recover. No, he's lying," she said. "He told me he owned this road." "That's not possible." Alex nodded. "It's very possible," he said calmly. "I do own this road. It's private property and you're standing on it right now." For a moment no one spoke. The officers didn't quite know how to handle it. One of them tried not to laugh. The other cleared his throat and said politely, "Ma'am, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding." She snapped. "He's been violating HOA codes, parking illegal vehicles, throwing unauthorized events." Alex gently interrupted. "Ma'am," he said, holding up a hand, "there's no HOA here. There never has been. You've been told that several times." She blinked, looking between Alex and the officers. "You expect me to believe that?" she said. "Every neighborhood has one." "There has to be one." The younger officer spoke softly. "Ma'am, this road isn't part of the city grid. It's private. There's no homeowners association, and that's our boss you just called us on." Her face turned bright red. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked completely lost for a moment. Then, as if trying to save face, she said weakly, "Well, I was just trying to do the right thing. I was trying to keep the neighborhood safe." Alex gave a small nod. "I appreciate people who care about their community," he said in a calm, professional tone. "But you've gone too far. You can't threaten people, send fake fines, or call the police on your neighbors for things that don't exist." She looked down at the ground, still clutching her clipboard. The officers stood quietly, giving her time to process what had just happened. After a few seconds, Alex continued, his voice still gentle. "You've made a mistake, but I'm not going to press charges. Just stop bothering people. Let everyone live peacefully. She mumbled something about miscommunication and confusion, then turned and walked quickly toward her house. The officers stayed behind for a moment, clearly trying not to laugh. One of them said, "You want us to write a report, Chief?" Alex smiled faintly. "No need," he said. "I think this one speaks for itself." As the patrol cars drove away, his friends burst out laughing. "I can't believe she actually called 911 on you," one said. Another added, "She thought she was calling the cops. She didn't realize she was calling your own team." Alex chuckled. "Yeah," he said. "Life has a funny sense of humor sometimes." The rest of the evening went smoothly. They finished dinner, shared a few more stories, and eventually said their goodbyes. The night air was quiet again, and for the first time in a while, the whole situation felt like it might finally settle down. But of course, things didn't end that easily. The next morning, Alex saw her outside, watering her plants like nothing had happened. When she noticed him watching, she gave a quick wave, the first friendly gesture she'd made in weeks. He waved back politely, but he could tell she was still embarrassed. Later that week, he noticed she stopped walking around with her clipboard. The fake notices disappeared. She no longer chased delivery drivers or stopped cars. For once, the road felt peaceful again. Word about the 911 call spread quickly among the neighbors. A few people came by to hear the story firsthand, laughing and shaking their heads. One older woman said, "I've lived here 20 years and never seen anything like that." "Calling the cops on the police chief, that's one for the books." Alex smiled. "Let's hope it stays that way," he said. He didn't want to embarrass her more than she already had embarrassed herself. So he didn't tell anyone her name, and he didn't post anything online. He just let the story fade. But as he would later find out, she wasn't completely done yet. Even though she stopped causing scenes outside, she began writing letters, not just to him but to other people too. Letters that claimed the HOA was being reactivated and that she was still the interim director. Alex didn't respond to any of them. He'd seen this kind of thing before, people doubling down when they couldn't admit they were wrong. Still, he knew he couldn't ignore it forever. If she kept doing this, she could end up tricking someone else or even getting herself in legal trouble. As he sat on his porch one evening, sipping coffee and watching the sunset, he thought about how strange life could be. He'd handled high-stakes operations, dangerous calls, and real emergencies, but somehow, this small neighborhood drama had been one of the most bizarre things he'd ever dealt with. He couldn't help but laugh softly to himself. "You never know who you're living next to," he said under his breath, and he was right. Because what came next would prove that this story wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. For a few peaceful weeks, the neighborhood felt normal again. The sun seemed brighter, the road quieter, and everyone finally started relaxing. The strange tension that had filled the air for so long was gone. Alex enjoyed coming home without worrying about notes on his door or arguments in the driveway. He thought maybe, just maybe, it was all behind him, but he had no idea that she wasn't quite finished. It started small. A single letter slipped under his door one morning. It wasn't aggressive this time. In fact, it sounded almost polite. It said something like, "Dear neighbor, I would like to make peace. I hope we can have a meeting to discuss the future of our community." There was no signature, but Alex didn't need one. The handwriting was the same, sharp, rushed, and slightly uneven. He sighed. He didn't respond. He figured if he ignored it, things would fade away completely. But 2 days later, a second letter came. Then a third. Each one talked about forming a new neighborhood committee and upholding community standards. It was clear she was trying to bring back her so-called HOA, but this time under a different name. Alex didn't get angry. He just shook his head and smiled slightly. "She just doesn't know when to quit," he said to himself. He decided to visit a few neighbors just to see if they were getting similar letters. Almost every house he stopped at had received one. Some people had them taped to their mailboxes, others had them stuck under the door like his. One man laughed when Alex showed him the letter. "Yeah, we got one too," he said. "My wife thought it was a prank." Another woman said, "She came to my door last night, tried to get me to sign some paper about community rules. I told her I wasn't interested and she stormed off." Alex knew this couldn't go on. It wasn't dangerous yet, but it was becoming disruptive again, so he decided to talk to her one last time. That evening, as the sun dipped low, he walked down the road toward her house. She was out front tending to her plants again, just like always. When she saw him coming, her posture stiffened. "Good evening," he said calmly. She hesitated, then gave a short nod.
"Evening." He stopped a few feet away, keeping his tone friendly.
"I've seen the letters," he said. "I know you're trying to organize something again, but you need to stop. There's no HOA here, and people are getting frustrated." She looked up, her eyes sharp again. "Someone has to take responsibility for this community," she said. "You might not care, but I do. People park wherever they want, lawns are overgrown, and there's no order." "Ma'am," he said gently, "people here take care of their homes just fine. We don't need rules or fines to live peacefully. Everyone just wants quiet and respect." She shook her head. "That's not how communities work. There must be structure." Alex smiled slightly. "There is," he said. "It's called being good neighbors." For a moment she looked like she wanted to argue more, but then her shoulders dropped a little. "I just wanted things to be better," she said softly. "I understand," Alex replied. "But this isn't the way to do it. You've already upset a lot of people. Maybe it's time to let go of this HOA idea and just enjoy living here." She didn't answer. She turned back toward her plants, pretending to focus on them. Alex didn't push further. He gave a small nod and started walking back to his house. He thought that was the end of it. But a week later, things took a strange turn again. One morning, Alex received a call from the county office. The woman on the line sounded confused. "Mr. Alex," she said, "we've received a few documents submitted under your property address. They appear to be requests for community zoning and bylaws, but they're incomplete." Alex frowned. "I didn't submit anything," he said. "Well," she said, "someone used your address and signed them with your name." That got his attention. He asked for copies to be sent to him. When they arrived later that day, his suspicion was confirmed. The handwriting matched hers. She had actually tried to file paperwork using his name, claiming he supported creating a local homeowners group. He knew she'd crossed the line now. Instead of confronting her directly this time, Alex went the professional route. He made a few calls, spoke to a legal advisor, and gathered copies of every letter she had sent. He didn't want to press charges, not yet, but he wanted an official record in case things got worse. About a week later, someone from the county's legal department reached out to her, explaining that her filings were invalid and possibly fraudulent. That visit seemed to shake her. Neighbors later said they saw her standing on her porch afterward, looking pale and quiet. For the first time since she'd moved in, she didn't have her clipboard. For a while, the street was peaceful again. The tension lifted completely. People smiled more when they passed each other. Kids played outside without being told to move off the road. One evening, Alex sat outside on his porch watching the sun go down. He felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. He didn't hate her, and in fact, he pitied her. She clearly wanted to belong somewhere, to be respected, but she'd gone about it in the worst way possible. That weekend, something unexpected happened. She came to his door. When Alex opened it, she was standing there with a small basket of muffins in her hands. "I baked these," she said awkwardly. "I just wanted to say sorry." Alex was honestly surprised. He looked at her for a long second before replying. "Thank you," he said gently. "That's very kind of you." She hesitated, shifting her weight. "I guess I went too far," she admitted quietly. "I thought I was helping, but I made everyone angry instead." He nodded. "You cared," he said. "But sometimes caring too hard makes us forget how to listen." She looked down, then gave a small laugh. "You sound like a teacher," he smiled. "Just someone who's seen enough arguments to know they never fix much." She nodded slowly. "I'll stop with the letters," she said.
"And the rules."
"I promise. That's all anyone wants," he said kindly. "We just want to live peacefully." She handed him the basket and turned to go, then stopped halfway down the path. "You really own this road?" she asked, half smiling now. "I really do," Alex said with a grin. "And I still don't charge parking fees." She laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd ever heard from her. After that, things really did change. She became quieter, friendlier even. A few weeks later, she joined a neighborhood cleanup that one of the families organized. She kept to herself mostly, but she was no longer hostile. One day, Alex saw her walking her dog, something she'd never done before, and they waved at each other like old neighbors who had finally found peace. The story spread around the community, but Alex never exaggerated it. When people brought it up, he just said, "It's all good now." Everyone just needed to understand each other. But deep down, he knew it had taught him something important, something about people. Sometimes the ones who cause the most trouble are the ones who just feel invisible. They reach for control because they don't feel seen. He didn't excuse what she did, but he understood it. A few months later, the neighborhood gathered for a small summer cookout. Families brought food, kids ran around, and laughter filled the air. Even she showed up, quietly helping arrange tables and refill drinks. No one mentioned the past. It was as if everyone had silently agreed to leave it behind. At one point, she walked over to Alex and said softly, "You know, you were right. Communities aren't built on rules. They're built on people." He smiled. "Exactly," she nodded. "I'm still learning." "We all are," he said. As the sun dipped below the trees and the air turned golden, Alex looked around at all the smiling faces, people talking, laughing, sharing stories. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time since she'd moved in, it felt like a true neighborhood. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, Alex sat on his porch again, the same way he had so many evenings before. He could hear the quiet hum of crickets, the rustle of trees, and in the distance, faint laughter drifting from a nearby house. He thought about everything that had happened, the arguments, the letters, the police call, and the strange journey that brought them here. It had started with conflict, but somehow it had ended with understanding. He smiled to himself, whispering softly, "Sometimes peace doesn't come easy, but it's always worth the effort." And with that, he leaned back, closed his eyes, and enjoyed the calm, knowing that after all the chaos, the road was finally quiet again. The next few months passed peacefully. The air on that little private road felt lighter, and people finally walked around without that quiet tension they used to carry. It was the kind of calm you don't notice until it's gone. The sound of kids laughing, sprinklers ticking, neighbors greeting each other on evening walks. Alex had almost forgotten how stressful things had been before. He'd learned to appreciate the silence of his home again, the steady hum of the crickets at night, the soft rustle of trees by his porch, the quiet drive down his road without someone watching every move. Every once in a while he'd see her outside. She still lived in the same house, but something about her was different. The stiff, defensive way she used to stand was gone. She waved now, small gestures, sometimes shy, and he always waved back. It was strange how time had shifted things. She had gone from being the source of endless frustration to just another neighbor who sometimes smiled at him in passing. Then one day, a small envelope arrived in Alex's mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note that said, "Thank you for being patient with me. I've been trying to make up for the trouble I caused. The neighborhood cleanup next weekend is my idea. Hope you'll come." Alex smiled when he read it. He folded the note neatly and placed it on his kitchen counter. He decided he'd go, not out of duty, but out of appreciation. That Saturday morning, he arrived early at the community park. Several neighbors were already there, picking up trash, trimming bushes, and painting the old benches. She was there too, wearing a sun hat and gloves, laughing with a few people as they worked. When she saw Alex walking up, she froze for a second, then smiled nervously. "You came," she said. "Wouldn't miss it," Alex said with a grin, grabbing a trash bag. "Need me on bench duty or trash patrol?" She chuckled. "You can take your pick. Just don't write me up if I paint over the lines." He laughed, shaking his head. "I'll try to keep it off your record." That simple moment, filled with light humor and forgiveness, changed everything. It wasn't about the past anymore. It was about growth, hers and his. As the day went on, everyone worked together. Some grilled food, others cleaned, and laughter filled the park. By noon, the whole area looked refreshed. Not just the grass and fences, but the sense of community itself. When it was all over, they gathered around for food. Someone had brought lemonade, another brought burgers. It wasn't a fancy event, but it felt genuine. She sat on a picnic table near Alex, sipping from a paper cup. "I used to think I was doing the right thing," she said quietly. "When I moved here, I didn't know anyone. I thought organizing rules would help people come together. I didn't realize it would just make them pull away." Alex nodded. "Sometimes we confuse control with connection," he said. "But people don't need to be controlled. They just need to be understood." She looked at him, thoughtful. "I think I get that now," he smiled. "That's all that matters." From that day on, she really changed. She stopped acting like she had authority over the neighborhood. Instead, she became part of it. She started greeting people kindly, offering to help with small things, watching someone's house while they were out of town, watering plants for an elderly neighbor, even baking treats for community events. Slowly, people began to accept her. It was almost funny how things turned around. The woman who once called the police on her own neighbor was now the one reminding others to be kind and patient. One evening, months later, she stopped by Alex's house again. This time she didn't have a clipboard or complaints, just a simple invitation. "I'm hosting a small dinner next weekend," she said. "Just a few of the neighbors. You should come. I promise, and no HOA meetings, no rules." Alex smiled warmly. "If there's food, I'll be there." When he showed up that weekend, her house looked different. The once closed blinds were open. The porch had string lights hanging across it, and soft music played in the background. Inside, laughter echoed from the kitchen as people chatted and shared stories. She had truly changed. As Alex sat down at the table, he noticed an old folder sitting on a shelf. It had a faded label that said HOA plans. He pointed to it jokingly. "You keeping that as a souvenir?" She laughed, a little embarrassed. "Yeah, a reminder not to let my imagination run away with me." "Well," Alex said, smiling, "it's a good reminder of how far you've come." She nodded, her eyes soft. "You know, I really should thank you. You could have made things so much worse for me back then. You didn't. You could have embarrassed me or filed a complaint, but you didn't. You treated me like a person, not a problem." Alex leaned back in his chair. "People make mistakes," he said simply. "What matters is what they do after." She smiled, and for a while neither of them said anything. The silence wasn't awkward, and it was peaceful. The dinner went on late into the evening. The sound of laughter carried out onto the quiet road, mixing with the soft chirp of crickets. The same road that had once been the center of conflict was now just another peaceful street, where neighbors gathered to share a meal. Over time, the story of what happened became something people talked about lightly, more of a funny neighborhood tale than a bitter memory. New families who moved in sometimes heard bits and pieces, but no one spoke with anger. It was just a reminder of how strange life can be, and how people can change. Eventually, life moved on. A year later, she decided to sell her house and move closer to her daughter in another state. The day before she left, she stopped by Alex's home one last time. She handed him a small envelope. "For you," she said softly. He opened it. Inside was a photo. A group shot from the neighborhood cleanup, everyone smiling in the sunshine. On the back, she'd written, "Thank you for teaching me that respect builds stronger walls than rules ever could." He looked up, smiling. "You didn't have to do this. I wanted to," she said. "I wanted you to know I really am sorry." "And thank you," Alex nodded. "Safe travels," he said. "And remember, no fake HOAs where you're going." She laughed, shaking her head. Never again. When her moving truck pulled away the next morning, several neighbors came out to wave goodbye. It wasn't a bitter farewell. It was friendly, even warm. People wished her well, and she waved back with a smile. After she left, the road felt different again. Not tense this time, but peaceful. Like the end of a long chapter. That night, Alex sat on his porch again, just like he always did. The same porch where so much had unfolded. The first argument, the patrol cars, the awkward apologies. Now it was quiet. The stars stretched across the sky, and the cool breeze carried the smell of pine and summer air. He thought about how strange life can be. How people can enter your story as trouble and leave as a lesson. A few days later, one of the neighbors dropped by. "Hard to believe she's gone," the man said. Alex nodded. "Yeah, but she turned things around." "She really did," the neighbor said. "You handled it well. Most people would have lost their patience long ago." Alex smiled faintly. "Sometimes patience is the only thing that works." After that, life went on quietly. The private road stayed peaceful, the way it was always meant to be. Every now and then, someone new moved in. But the community stayed close. No HOA, no rules, just mutual respect. Years later, people still remembered that story. How a misunderstanding turned into a valuable lesson about empathy and restraint. Whenever someone brought it up, Alex would laugh and say, "Yeah, that was the time someone called 911 on me for parking on my own road." Everyone would laugh. but he'd always add something meaningful at the end. It's easy to fight back. It's harder to understand, but that's what really fixes things. It became something of a quiet motto around the neighborhood, and maybe that's what made that little private road special. It wasn't perfect, but it was full of people who had learned, sometimes the hard way, that kindness, patience, and understanding go further than any set of rules ever could. Alex never told the story to make himself look good. He told it because it reminded people that even when life feels unfair, even when others act out of pride or fear, there's always room for change. And sometimes, people just need one person to give them that chance. As the seasons passed and the years rolled on, the trees along the private road grew taller, the paint on the old fences faded, and the world moved forward. But one thing stayed the same, the peace that finally settled after all the noise. Every night, when the crickets sang and the moonlight brushed the quiet road, Alex would sit on his porch smiling to himself, remembering how something that started with anger ended with laughter, and how a road once full of conflict became a place of calm again.